Of real estate real fast, brought to you by ListingSpark. I'm going to be your host today. My name is Jistel. I'm the broker, one of the co-founders here at ListingSpark. To give a little bit of information for those of you tuning in for the first time. So, what we do here at ListingSpark is we're a technology-driven real estate brokerage. We help home sellers and specifically investors sell their homes quickly, safely, for the most money possible, while saving them thousands of dollars in commissions. And today I'm super excited about our guest. So we have Julie Daniels. Julie Daniels is the Director of Operations here at ListingSpark. She is one of our earliest employees, I think employee number one, actually, outside of the founders. And Julie is a massive part of the success of this company. She oversees a very large team that manages all of the listings that we take on. So last year alone, Julie managed over 1,400 listings that added up to over $350 million in closed transactions. And so she's an absolute wealth of knowledge when it comes to the real estate world. Julie, I'm going to give you a minute to just kind of introduce yourself, talk about your role here at ListingSpark. And we're just going to have some fun today talking about what's going on in the real estate market and kind of best practices for people that are looking to buy and sell their home, and some general advice and just talking shop about real estate. So I'm going to turn it over to you.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. This is exciting. Just a little backstory. I'm originally from New York, and we moved out of DC area here about 14 years ago. And when I got here, I had previously worked for a pretty large mortgage brokerage. It was in the mortgage world, but I kind of changed it up. I went ahead and worked for a builder, a national builder here in the area. I was with them for about 7 years. While I was there, I went from the design studio, as well as doing their closings and to their sales. So that was a lot of hard work I put in, but it was awesome because I got to know not just the Austin area, but Texas as a whole pretty quickly. So that was exciting. And then about 7 years ago, I joined ListingSpark, and it's been a wild ride since then. I'm grateful and thankful for this company and just the team and what we've been able to build. And then just on the day-to-day, yes, we do have a massive team that is working really hard, and I'm always proud of them. And it's just exciting to see the growth, over the years. So super excited to be here to talk about real estate and what we talk about all day, every day, right? We live in
and it's funny, your first week here, I was actually out with my second kid. She had just been born, so I didn't even get to meet you on your first day. But one thing that I have absolutely been in awe of since you've been here is just your mastery of creating systems and processes and allowing a tight-knit core group of team members to give a great customer experience to everybody that's working with ListingSpark to sell their house. And so I thought today there's no better guest to bring on, especially in kind of the crazy times that we have right now in the real estate world. And so what I would like to unpack today and have our listeners get out of this is just, if somebody is going to be selling their house anytime, if they're currently selling now or they're thinking about selling their home over the next year, things are obviously different than they were this time last year and really for the last decade. And so that's a unique set of challenges. And nobody knows what it takes to sell a house better than you do. And you see different scenarios every day. And so hopefully we'll be able to provide a lot of great value to not just our investor customers who are, selling anywhere from several houses a month to several flips a year, but just your average person that hasn't sold a house in maybe 6 or 7 years. And we're in a completely different landscape now than they were the last time. So just to start kind of right out of the gates, I wanted to talk a little bit about just best practices for a seller when they're listing their house right now.
Yeah, so this is something that, through the years, we've really narrowed down exactly what it takes, no matter the market, really, here at ListingSpark, for sellers to be successful. It's really, really important that, one, you have exposure, right? We want you on the MLS. We want to be able to market your property out to hundreds of sites. I mean, the world we live in now, everybody is going to decide if they're going to go look at your house and actually take the time out of their day to do that by looking at the pictures, right? looking at what it says online. So it's so important. Again, just leading into the marketing, into the actual professional pictures, which we provide, as well as, really just knowing your market. A lot of times I feel like we hear a lot of, oh, well, this person sold their house and this is what happened here. And it's a lot of like he said, she said stuff. But the facts, the data, that's what's important. And it's so important to know, like, what is the average days? What is the price point in my area? What is going on? And especially like Aaron mentioned, the changing market, we really need to know that information or get that information more frequently. We need to be able to see, like, not just what happened 6 months ago, 9 months ago, but like what happened 30 days ago, what's happening, this week. So it's super important to know your market.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think over 95% of home buyers are going to find their house online first. And so what sellers need to do is they need to put themselves in the mind of a buyer, go online, look for houses in your neighborhood as if a buyer is going to be searching for your house. What do you see? What listings look great? What are they doing? What listings look terrible? How do you avoid looking like that? When you're curating your description, what's important about the house that's going to jump off the page? And I think those are all things that a seller definitely has to do to prep. I think you hit the nail on the head when it comes to the market data. I think what's easy for a lot of people to get caught up in is reading the headlines that are talking about, national statistics, or even, we're sitting in Austin. We operate all over the state of Texas. Most Texas markets have been incredibly strong again for the last decade. But the reality of it is that every neighborhood is different. Every neighborhood is actually going to have a different days on market. They're going to have a different price per square foot. They're going to have a different sales price range. They're going to have a different type of construction, level of upgrades, what's normal and what's not normal when it comes to finishes in the house. So you've got to get away from these generalizations, and you've got to dig very, very deeply into the granular details of the market data. And that's the only way that you're going to really know if you're going to be successful and how to be successful. And I think one more thing to add before, let's say, kind of pre-market correction or market shift, we would be very laser focused on closed sales over a 6-month, 180-day period. And I think that's still important to look at. But when we were talking right before we jumped in to start the podcast, 6 months ago was a lifetime ago. So we can't really use the same time horizon now that we were back then. For me, I'm looking more kind of post June, like June and beyond. For me, June is when we really started to see the market start to correct. And so I'm shortening up my window of time that I'm looking at the sales comps. I'm also looking a lot more at active listings than I was before. So, we were in a time where inventory was a huge problem. Like in Austin, we spent an extended period of time with months of inventory at less than a month. And for a long time, it was 2 weeks, meaning there may be no active listings on in a neighborhood at all, or there's one. Now in that same neighborhood, there could be 10, there could be 15. And that's your competition. So when a buyer's looking and you're reining in your search criteria to be similar to your house, and let's say you have a 2,000 square foot house and you're running kind of a search for 1,700 to 2,300 square feet, 4 bedrooms, whatever, what's populating is active. So that buyer that's looking for your house is going to look at all of those other houses. They're going to for sure look at them online. They're probably know now they've got some time and there's not a huge crunch. They're not up against the gun on multiple offer situations. So they're going to be taking their time to look through all those houses. So you need to be looking at those actives and understanding how you stack up against them. Are you better? Are you worse? Are you right in the middle, which is a good place to be? You probably don't want to be at the top when it comes to price. Or if you are at the top when it comes to price and you can tell there's some homes that are arguably nicer on a better street, on a better lot, and they're less expensive than yours, you're going to have some problems. You're going to have to account for that. You're going to have to wait until maybe those go off the market before you can expect to get a contract. And so all of those things are really critically important to understanding how you're going to curate a strategy to sell your house and set proper expectations. So you're spending a lot of time now managing expectations with our sellers that are still struggling to get out of the mindset of where we have been. And so I hear it every day, you having these conversations with people that are getting frustrated or patience is running a little bit thin, and you're showing the market data and it's like, hey, you're at 40 days. You have all these other houses in your neighborhood that are at 80 days or 90 days. Like, we haven't even reached the average yet. You got to be patient. You've got to understand that it's going to take some time. And I think knowing the data up front allows people to stay calmer, make calculated decisions, and kind of push them through some challenging times. And I just think that's incredibly important. So that kind of leads into a next topic I want to talk about is like, how is this changing market? You know, we talked a little bit about how it's affecting sellers, but I think it's important to talk about how it's affecting buyers as well. How are their strategies changing? What should we expect from buyers now that maybe we weren't seeing again a year ago? So on your end, what are you seeing with buyers nowadays and their offers coming in?
Yeah, just to add one more point to just cap up what we were just talking about, something else that's important is that when you list with us too, it's, we're not waiting till you're listed to say, hey, these are the expectations. We're constantly setting those expectations with our clients because the market has changed. A year ago, you said pre-June. I mean, those were different times, right? And people still are kind of sticker shocked or whatever you want to call it, that things switch so quickly because, it takes time for people to realize really what's happening, but we really had a pulse on it. So what we're seeing is, we need to give this information more frequently and, sooner to our clients, So just want to make that point that that's so important before you even go on the market, knowing and educating and having that information. Now, what we're seeing though, is we're putting ourselves in the best position they can be in at this point because buyers do feel like, hey, I do have a little bit more of an upper hand. If we cut back to a year ago, 25 offers, lines out the door, especially in the Austin area, trying to see the property, let alone put an offer in, right? Over asking price, people not caring if it appraises. I mean, it got to a point where, buyers were just desperate almost to just be able to get the property, right? We're not seeing that anymore. I mean, that's, to be real direct, that just has stopped. Buyers are taking their time looking. They are coming in, not over asking price like we were seeing. We're not seeing multiple offers. We're not seeing, a property goes up on Thursday. We're not seeing, offers come in Saturday, quickly. Let me hurry up, get this offer in so I don't have to worry about, anyone else getting an offer in this weekend. We're seeing them maybe the following week come in or even, based on that area and those average days even further. So buyers definitely are taking their time and looking at their options a lot more now.
Yeah, just to kind of give people some data points to think of. So October was the lowest number of closed sales in, I think it was 12 years. So essentially back to think about the 08 days.
Yep.
And so right now buyers are scared. They're scared of what their interest rate looks like. They're scared of what the market is going to do. They're scared that the market hasn't fallen all the way and they don't want to buy now because the home values may drop again. Personally, I'm not saying that's the right mentality to have as a buyer. I think a buyer right now in the market right now can get an absolutely smoking deal on a house. And for those of you that didn't listen, like last week we had Justin Robofsky on, who's a mortgage wizard, and there's lots of loan products that are out there right now that can help a buyer still get a good rate. You can work in. A lot of buyers right now are negotiating in a seller credit to help them buy down their rate. That's extremely common right now. So sellers need to be prepared to entertain that. But right now, we'll see an offer that'll come in that'll be 10% or more below the asking price. So on a $500,000 house, you might see a $450,000 offer. And sellers can't be insulted by that. They have to get unemotional. They have to treat it like this is a business. This is an investment for the buyer. They're going to be even more cognizant of that now because they're concerned about where the market is heading. So they want to get a great deal on things. So it's important to take every offer incredibly seriously. It's important to negotiate hard as a seller, but be flexible at the same time. And sellers should understand it's going to feel like you're taken an L on your listing now compared to a year ago. But the reality of it is that you should feel confident that what you may lose mentally when you're selling your house, you can gain that back on your purchase. And so even though it might not feel like it's the greatest time to sell at this moment, if you want to trade up or you want to go find a smoking deal and negotiate the hell out of it, now is a great time to do that. So there's still opportunity out there for sure. But people need to understand there's a lot of buyers and sellers that are sitting on the sidelines right now, just waiting to see what's going to happen. And until we start to get some good news and the theme of the headlines nationally starts to change, we're in for some bumpy times. So I was looking at some stats. I try to do a lot of research on real estate economists, both locally and nationally. And, especially here in the Austin area, I mean, there is certain areas of Austin have already fallen 10%, arguably more in some areas. I don't think we've seen all of the pain just yet. So, I think there's a chance that Austin and other markets in Texas could fall somewhere between 10 and 15%. But that's all relative when those same neighborhoods that have fallen 10% grew by 35% last year, or 25% or 30%. So, I mean, again, it's all relative. We have to understand, I think the last couple guests that we've had on have done a good job of highlighting we can't use 2021 as the baseline or the benchmark. For those of you that follow or know of Mike Delpreet, he's a professor of real estate at Colorado University. He's just a great real estate mind. He specializes in the iBuyers and other things like that. And he wrote a really great article where he talked about how we simply can't look at 2021 as a baseline. We have to look at it as an outlier, because it is. So we can't base our expectations on where we were last year. Nobody's a wizard. Nobody can time the market perfectly. If they do, some people get lucky doing that, but we can't expect to be able to do that. And so what we've got to do is we have to operate off information that we have right now. We have to operate on our current situation and what we're trying to accomplish. And then we have to do the best job we can at that time. So right now, if I needed to sell my house and move, I'm looking at that as it's still a good opportunity for me to capitalize on this rapid growth of appreciation that we had previously and look for a great opportunity to buy. And I think buyers and sellers should view the market through that lens. They also have to understand real estate is one of the most stable asset classes you could possibly be invested in. And as long as you're patient and you have a good strategy, you're going to withstand any kind of market correction. So everybody who bought a house in 2007, if they sat in that house long enough, they made money even if the value dipped in 2008 and 2009. So we need to look at it through that lens. There's always opportunities out there, no matter what kind of market we're in. With that being said, Julie, how can a seller maximize their chances of success in this market right now?
Well, I think what you're saying is so true, that sellers have to be open. They have to be open to negotiating. They have to not be so emotional. I know it's very challenging, and I have lots of conversations with sellers. I understand, especially when you've whether you're an investor and put a lot of money and time into the property, and now you're thinking, oh, I thought I was going to get this, now I'm not. Or if you've been in the house 20 years and you put just a lot of memories and kids grown up and just having those emotional ties or financial ties, I understand that, but we have to be able to, with how the market is now, kind of separate ourselves from that and be open to negotiating. I've been watching very closely what has been going on with our clients, and there's been several deals even this week that if they didn't take the time to negotiate, they would just be sitting on the market, wondering when is my next offer going to come. Yeah. So the biggest thing I think that sellers can do is any offer they get is start that conversation and start negotiating and see if we can come to a point where everybody's happy and it's a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, totally agree. I think taking the emotions out of it is hugely important. I understand that's incredibly challenging when you have a very emotional transaction. Our investors can do a really good job of separating themselves from that aspect of things. They're focused on dollars and cents, and that allows them to be a little bit more open-minded when it comes to negotiations. It's more of just a line decision. Whereas you take somebody that's lived in a house for a lifetime, they raise their kids there. It's very emotional. So it's easy for us to say, don't be emotional. But the reality is that is very good advice. I think the other thing that we've got to do, and I know you have little kids in sports. I have little kids in sports. I coach my son's baseball team, and what we tell the kids is a saying we use all the time is like, control the controllables. There's a lot of things that you're not going to be able to control, but you have to be able to control the things you do control, and your emotions are one of those, and the way you behave when you get into a situation that's unsettling, or if you have a buyer that's just particularly obnoxious when it comes to their negotiations, you have to control the way you're acting and behaving and negotiating, and you have to stay poised and you have to stay focused. And we have to do that when we're selling real estate. It's the same thing. And so the other thing when we talk about control the controllables are you have to maximize every opportunity you get, because right now, I'm helping some very close friends. We have their house listed. My wife and I have known them for well over a decade. They're very close to us. And, so I feel I feel a personal responsibility to make sure they have the best outcome. And I was talking to them yesterday, and, their house has been on the market for 45 days, 50 days ish, which feels like an absolute eternity. But there's other houses on the neighborhood, numerous other houses on the neighborhood that have been over 100. And they have to have that perspective. They've been on for 50 days, and I think they've had 8 showings, and that doesn't feel like a lot. But what they have done, and they've done really well, is they've never missed a showing. They've always made sure the house is show ready. They're Johnny on the spot when it comes to responding to questions. The house always looks very presentable. They prepped the house. They did a lot of work getting the house looking great. So it was not only picture ready, but show ready. And they decluttered. They did all of those things that we know are important when it comes to selling their house. And so that does maximize the chance that when the buyer does show up and the right one comes along, they're going to ultimately get an offer that's going to work out for them. And I think we have to, we can recognize that when times get tough, it can get exhausting to, get your house picked up and get it ready and get out the door and let a buyer go look at it. And then ultimately that doesn't materialize in anything, but it's a game of numbers, and we've got to control what we can control. And that's probably the best advice that I can give to sellers right now, is just make sure that you don't let fatigue and emotions get in the way of understanding on what it takes to be successful.
Yeah, and also, and just to jump in there too, is that I know that if it's an investor, they put a lot of work into it and they did all these things. List that stuff out. Make a PDF, like write out, like if it's, if you're a retail seller, you've been living there, but you did different upgrades, different things that maybe don't stand out or don't, pop right away, or, it's not the major big things. Like list those things out. Give it to us. We put that stuff in the MLS. We leave that stuff out on the counter so when someone comes in, small things like that. And then I think what you said is so important. So many times I see sellers push back because the showing doesn't fit with their schedule. So I think this just goes back to like planning. Like if you really need to or want to sell your house, you have to think about all these things before it goes live, because you're really going to lose opportunity if you don't take advantage of all of those times that people want to come and see it. Because again, surprisingly, it's like the one showing they don't want to take, when then they want to reschedule it, then that agent tells us, oh, they already went and saw something else and put an offer in. And I'm like, see, that could have been your house. So it's something that it's so important that you, make it easy for buyers to see the house and understand what your house is about.
Well, it goes into what we were talking about earlier. So if I know I have 10 other houses that are live in my neighborhood and they're similar to mine, buyers are not going to probably come back to your house. They've carved out, everybody has a busy schedule. It's hard. I mean, especially if you're in a neighborhood that a likely buyer might be a family, it's hard to get your kids wrangled up to bring them with you, or get a babysitter and go house hunting. And if you're a buyer and you have 7 or 8 houses on your list and one of those says you can't come, I mean, it's not like they're going to clear their schedule again to go see one more house. That was when they were out looking for houses, and you can't bank on that they're dying to get into your house and see it. That is the case sometimes. but it shouldn't be expected. And so I think the other thing that people have to realize is that when buyers have options, they are looking for really nice sellers that are looking to be accommodating and are looking to negotiate and are looking to make a win-win situation with a buyer that's looking to buy their house. And what they're not looking for is a seller that is coming off as a pain in the butt, obtuse, unwilling to negotiate, unwilling to be flexible, and is going to be a very challenging transaction. A buyer's going to tell that seller right now to go kick rocks because they can go find any other house in the neighborhood. And there's going to be a seller that's dying to have them as a buyer. So we have to get rid of this idea of what sellers could do in the previous years, where they could just call the shots, say, no, I won't take that. Yes, you got to pay over asking. No, you can't. I want you to waive your, I want you to, you start doing that noise now and you're not going to get away with it. And the other thing that I tell a lot of sellers is that don't try to push out terms onto a buyer before they've even made an offer. Like, oh, if you want to make an offer, it's got to be as is. You've got to do this. You've got to do that. I want to see this in the offer. Let them make the offer. You can negotiate it. You can counter them, but you should not give anybody a reason to not make an offer on your house. And so sit back, be welcoming, be inviting, be the kind of seller that somebody wants to work with, be the kind of house that somebody wants, be living in a house that somebody wants to buy, and be willing and happy to have somebody that's interested in buying your house and make it work that way. So that's definitely my advice. Before we kind of walk into the last topic, I wanted to remind everybody, if you're viewing this live, if you're on Facebook or YouTube or LinkedIn or anywhere else viewing it live, feel free to chat in if you guys have any questions. We're going to finish the end of the podcast with a little bit of Q&A if anybody has any questions. Or if you're watching this later and you have any questions for Julie or myself, you can always reach us. You can go to the website. We got a chat feature on the website. You can find us that way. Send us a message through one of the forms in there, and we'd be happy to talk shop and talk real estate with you. So if you have any questions, feel free to chime in. And just kind of the last, we kind of talked about them a little bit a minute ago, so I kind of spoiled this last one. But in your opinion, Julie, what are some of the things that sellers are doing right now or can do that sabotages themselves?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these things overlap. So I agree, we've kind of hit on some of this. But the thing that I wish that I could kind of drill into every seller's mind is that it's okay if somebody gives you a bad offer. It's okay if they have an issue with your roof. It's okay if they say this, that, whatever. That's all part of negotiations. So I definitely agree, Aaron, like before they even have an offer over to you that's, signed by buyers and that you actually can physically go through and really look at, I would say I'm open to everything, any type of financing, any type of whatever you're going to send, Are you willing to pay for a home warranty? Yes, you can get, yes. Am I willing to, are you willing to pay for title policy? I mean, any of those things that they ask, I would say yes to everything, because at the end of the day, especially on the seller side, you were going to look at that contract, you're going to go through everything and just look at your bottom line. So if the bottom line, it comes out the same and they got a home warranty, I mean, for you as a seller, does that really make a difference? But in their mind, it does make a difference because it makes them feel like you're working with them. You're trying to give them something, same thing. The other thing that we didn't kind of touch on, Aaron, is that once people are under contract now, there's a lot more negotiations happening during the option period as well. We're seeing, buyers come back with some more requests than we definitely saw during the height of 2021. So again, we need to take the same mindset during that time and say like, okay, I know you're asking for these things. Give me some time. Let me do some research. I tell sellers all the time, if you just got your roof fixed and they're saying something's wrong with the roof, get the documents. Let's just show it to them. Like, that's not insulting. It can be presented in a way like, hey, I know you said that you think my AC needs to be serviced. Well, I just actually get it seasonally serviced. It was just done. Here's the documents. I mean, There's so many things that you can do to make everybody end up with a win here, and to still be successful in this, ever-changing market that we're currently experiencing, that we just need to be open to those things, and not, just go out there and say, nope, 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 nope. Because unfortunately, I think that's the number one thing. And I know we've probably said it a couple times on here, but I watch sellers sabotage themselves all the time, or self-sabotage themselves by saying just no, and not even having a discussion.
I 100% agree. If you haven't listened to it, go back and listen to the podcast we did with Clayton Bailey, who's the owner of Green Scene Inspections. And, we talked a lot about what sellers can do to prep for what happens when the buyer actually gets under contract. What are the most common items that are going to get flagged on an inspection? There's so many things you can be proactive about that. Julie, perfect example of have your AC service so you can have a record to show that you've been taking care of, the mechanicals and stuff like that in your house. Get your roof looked at. See if there's any issues that you're going to possibly come out when it comes to hail or any, wind or shingle damage up there. There's things that you can do to prepare for it. But I think one thing that every seller needs to understand, and I actually also just wrote a blog post about this that's published on the site, the as-is provision in the contract can be really super confusing. And so what most people don't realize is that, that section of the contract only has two options. It is the buyer's taking it as is, or the buyer has to name out all of the things that they want to be repaired. The seller or the buyer has no idea what they want to have repaired until they have their inspection. So they're not even able to put anything on there. I mean, unless they see something cosmetic and they want you to redo the carpet or they want you to do this. But I mean, the reality is the buyer knows absolutely nothing about your house until they get it inspected. That's why they have an option period. Then they get it inspected. And so I can't tell you how many sellers are frustrated over a buyer asking for repairs when they go, well, they already agreed to buy it as is. Well, they're, as an average layperson who knows, nothing fundamentally about the foundation and the roof and the mechanicals and the HVAC and the plumbing, they did take it as is. And now they've learned a lot of new information about your house, and it's scaring the crap out of them, and they don't know what to do about it unless we can negotiate things and make them happy again. And so sellers have to understand as is doesn't really mean as is for the most part. Or if you're saying I'm absolutely 100% adamant that this transaction is as is and there's going to be no repairs, no credits, no nothing, that really does need to explicitly be stated in the listing and probably reiterated when we're in the negotiations phase. I personally think that's not a good idea, because you're almost telling the buyer, I know there's issues with my house and I want you to just take it as it is. And that's scary for a buyer that's going to likely give you a lower offer. Buyers are willing to negotiate repairs. It doesn't always have to be the seller's taking a bath on all that stuff. Sometimes the buyer will take a reasonable credit and they'll fix stuff later, but be willing to negotiate it, be understanding of that situation. And so I think that was some fantastic advice. Some other advice for me is sellers should always put themselves in the minds of a buyer and an agent and what is likely to drive them crazy. So for example, we've got a very sweet older woman who's selling her house, and she's adamant that for all of her showings, she gives a tour, a guided tour of her home. And she's gotten feedback multiple times that they don't like that. They don't want a tour. They want to be able to look and talk candidly and be able to, let's face it, talk trash about the house without the seller caring about it. That's what they want to do. They don't want to have an agent or a seller, shadowing them around the house and they feel uncomfortable and they're going to rush out of that house. That appointment is going to be shorter. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be odd. They don't like it. If it looks like they like it, they're being nice and they're being kind and they're just telling you that. But behind closed doors, they hate it. And so what a buyer really wants is they want you to get out of the house. They want you to be away for 20, 30 minutes. They want to be able to walk through that house completely comfortably in being able to talk with their agent, come up with a strategy, maybe talk about how they might negotiate things, pick out things they do like and don't like, and they don't want to have you standing over them. They don't want that for showings. They don't want that for inspections. They don't want that for appraisals. So that's where it becomes very important to do what you mentioned earlier. If you have things that you want the buyer and their agent to know about your house, Well, the MLS has limited real estate on that page that we can put. It's got a character limit on the description. It's got check boxes, and there's only certain things that we can select. And so if there's information that just cannot be input into the MLS because there's not a field for it, put it on a separate Word document, turn it into a PDF, put it as an attachment, laminate it, and put it in your house. There's a million things you can do to get that information across to buyers without standing right next to them and pointing it out to them during a really awkward, uncomfortable showing that they're rushing out of the house for. So that's some other advice I would give. All right, we've got some really good questions.
Oh, go ahead. Before we go to the questions, just something else I wanted to say. We talked a lot about like how sellers don't self-sabotage and do all these things. Something that is a positive for sellers right now in this market, I just want to finish with this before we get to the questions, is that you have to understand you may not be getting multiple offers. You may not be getting offers as quickly, but you're getting more qualified people, right? Yeah. People that are getting approved right now in this market and that are putting offers in at the way the interest rates are. And Aaron, you can tell me how you feel, about this as well, is that I just feel like those deals have a higher probability of going through and closing, and people are more prepared. In 2021, I mean, when rates were low, I would say it wasn't like 2008, but there might be some people that don't have the cash in the bank if something comes up and they need, for appraisal shortage to negotiate or just something happens. So I think that on a positive note, just with sellers, you have to understand that the people that are actually submitting these offers, whether they're where you want them to be or not, they're way more qualified.
I think buyers right now are the real deal for sure. I think that's a great point. I think that's a good positive.
Good positive way to end that part.
And I couldn't agree more. I think the buyers now, they have to be mature buyers. They have to be serious. They have to be savvy. They have to be prepared. They have to be more financially stable. Lending's tightened up a lot. So I think that's a fantastic point. Okay. We got a question from William. When is the market going to get back to how it was 6 months ago? That's a good question. And the answer is, if I had that answer, William, I would be an incredibly wealthy man. I'm not a fortune teller. The answer could be never. I mean, generationally, that may have been the best year in real estate that we'll ever see, point blank, period. With that being said, the market may go down and it will go up. I mean, that's just what it does. So for me, I think we will see some signs of life. I'm hoping in and around kind of Q2 of next year. And I think it will coincide with the seasonal uptick for the year. And I'm hoping by then, Jerome Powell with the Fed is going to feel like they've gotten inflation under control. They're going to ease up on their rate hikes. We're going to see mortgage rates come down. We're going to see consumer confidence hopefully start to go up. We're going to start to see affordability help, because if values do come down, that an additional maybe 5 to 10%. And rates come down, that is going to equal more affordability, probably a little bit more consumer confidence from a buyer standpoint. And we're going to see some more buyers that are going to jump off the sidelines. And so I think we've probably got a little bit of a longer winter ahead of us. I think we're going to be seeing a lot less closed sales. We're going to see inventory go up, months of inventory go up, days on market go up. But what I want to be very clear about is houses are still selling. We are still selling listings. We are still selling houses. We are still getting offers. The real estate market has not ended. It's not toppled over like a building. It's slowed down. It's correcting. And it's important to understand that while that happens, things still go on and they still happen. And so I think hopefully we'll see signs of life starting to happen maybe towards the end of Q1 and into Q2 next year. And then I think, I think everybody in the real estate world, from what I've read, is feeling like we have the potential for a full-blown recovery kind of in 2024. So that's what I would hope for. Okay. Another question. What's a good credit to offer a buyer? That's an awesome question. We talked a little bit about this on the last podcast. If I'm a seller, I would be prepared to offer 2 to 3% of the purchase price as a credit. I know that feels like a gargantuan amount of money, but right now what's really popular is the 2-1 buy downs. And what that means is if rates are at 6.5% and you do the 2-1 buy down for your first year, the rate isn't 6.5%, it's 4.5%. that's very expensive for the buyer up front, and they don't want to pay for that because the rate is going to slide back up to par in the third year, and their hope is they're going to be able to refi out of it. And so they're asking for the seller to pay for some of that credit. Now, what a lot of these buyers are willing to do is they're actually willing to pay a little bit of higher price if the seller is willing to give them back that credit, because the buy down on the rate is going to save them real dollars and cents, like $600-700 a month on their monthly payment, if not more, depending on the price point. Whereas $10,000 or $20,000 in a price adjustment is saving them probably $70 to $150 a month. So I would say be prepared to offer credit anywhere from 1% to 3%. It could be more. Government loans max out at a 3% credit for the buyer. That can be given from the seller. So there's some limitations there from lending guidelines, but I would be prepared for that. Okay. Would you suggest that a seller gets an inspection prior to listing the house? That's a great one. What do you think, Julie?
So this is something that we actually get asked about a lot. So I would not recommend that they would necessarily do this, just because put yourself in the shoes of the buyer. They're going to want to get their own inspection, and inspection isn't cheap, and you don't want to spend money on something that, in my opinion, is maybe going to be okay, but it's just an inspector's opinion. I would rather see our sellers go out and get like a roof guy come out to look at the roof specifically, or the AC serviced, because again, putting yourself in the buyer's shoes, why am I going to trust your inspector? I'm going to get my own inspection. That's just how things are done. But with that being said, something I would recommend, and I'm curious to see what you're going to think, Aaron, I think you're on the same page, is if you're in a market that there's no market data, or things are not selling, or you're really having trouble really deciding because you have a tight margin how to price your house, I would highly recommend a desktop appraisal. I would definitely rather see a seller spend the couple $100s to get that versus an inspection, because that will give them the best idea with a non-biased person looking at the property where they should probably price their house. And potentially they could use that in some form of negotiations down the line.
I agree 1,000% on both. I think getting a pre-inspection is something that is, it's not the end of the world if you go do it. It's going to cost you $500 or $600. And if you want the peace of mind of knowing exactly what's going to pop up on an inspection, it's not the worst idea in the world. But what you're going to notice on a lot of inspections is that inspector is going to make an observation, and then he's going to recommend you go get a roofer. He's going to recommend you get a qualified HVAC professional or a plumber. And so getting a roofer out to certify your roof, getting your AC serviced, those are the things that an inspector is going to likely recommend anyway. And so just kind of jumping straight into those is a really good idea. As far as the appraisal goes, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. So first off, we're real estate agents and brokers. We're not, there are a lot of agents out there that are very well qualified to tell you what your home is worth. And a lot of appraisers are agents, but there's a lot of agents out there. Let's face it. We're in a very oversaturated industry, and there's a lot of agents that do this kind of part-time. They don't do a whole lot of transactions. And frankly, they don't really know the proper way to value a home or tell a buyer what that home is worth. And appraisers they're governed by TREC, and they have certain guidelines and things that they have to do when doing an appraisal report. So it's a lot more formalized, a lot more official. And you can kind of slap the buyer in the face with your appraisal report and say, this is where I got my value from. And it's a very comprehensive report. And I think that can be very valuable. It can be very valuable if in that exact situation you outlined, to where it's really challenging to come up with value because there's not a ton of comps, or it's a really unique property. And I think having some validation there is a really good idea for sure. So
I feel emotionally too, that'll kind of, as the seller, I know how I would feel putting myself in the seller's shoes. I know how our sellers expressed to us that it's kind of made them just feel better. It made them feel better about sitting on the market longer with the market changing. It just made them feel better knowing that, okay, this is somebody that, reviewed this impartial, and now I really trust what everyone's telling me, because I think, again, a lot of people still don't feel like that changed. But
Man, it's hard to believe we're already up on 45 minutes. We have one more question. This is a really good one too. What is the number one thing I can do to make my home more competitive? Um, so I'm going to take that, Julie. I'll let you chime in. Hopefully you'll agree with me. It's price. I mean, let's be real. It is your price. There is no other factor that is going to be as important to a buyer or an agent that's giving advice to a buyer than your price. And so there's a lot of things you can try to do to fix up your house and make it fancier and make it nicer. There's no guarantee that the buyer that buys your house will agree or like those things that you did to update your house. So going that route could be throwing good money after bad. And so the reality of it is do the best job you can to be the most competitive you can on your price. That is the number one factor when it comes to selling your house. If anybody tells you anything differently, I'm going to tell you right now, they're being disingenuous and they're lying. There are things that you can do to optimize your chances of success outside of just price, but price is the number one thing, hands down, point blank, period. Nothing is even a close second. You'll never convince me otherwise. What are your thoughts, Julie?
I agree 100%. So there's been lots of times that someone, one of our sellers will call in and be like, I haven't had any showings. And then I look at their market data and I see that they're outpriced their area. So what's happening is not only they're not getting showings because they're overpriced, they're not even coming up in searches when these agents are taking clients out, buyers, right, potential buyers to those areas. They're not even on their radar because they feel that they just want to stay at this high price. It's just not practical. It's not practical in any market to be that outpriced because you're just not going to show up in searches. You're not going to get the exposure that we're working so hard to get for you to get those buyers and those showings. So 100%. All the other things are important, but if you don't price correctly, they kind of become
obsolete. Couldn't agree more. That was a great question. Perfect question to end today's show on. I want to thank everybody for hanging with us and joining us. It looks like we had several people watching on YouTube and Facebook, and so we really appreciate everybody that's been tuning in. It's hard to believe this is episode 8 already, and so we typically do these Wednesdays. We went a little bit early today because of the holiday. And Julie, I want to thank you so much for coming on. There was no doubt in my mind that you would come very well prepared and have some awesome things to talk about. And you certainly delivered on that. So thank you for joining us. Everybody, thanks again for sticking around and joining us for Real Estate Real Fast. We're going to be coming to you again, typically again, Wednesdays at 1. You can also check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. You can find us on Facebook. If you have any questions about the world of real estate, please reach out. We're always happy to talk shop. You can find us at ListingSpark.com. We'd love the opportunity to chat with you, hopefully work with you, help you get your home sold and save a few bucks in the process. And we will see you guys next episode. Thanks again for joining.